Late at night, when the world is silent, some people experience things that can't be explained. Strange noises, eerie sightings, and unsettling encounters that leave a lasting chill in the air. But what happens when those stories come from someone just like you? Could these be real? Keep listening as we share these true scary stories from Reddit, because you won't believe what happens next. But before we get lost in the shadows, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss out our chilling upcoming episodes. If you're enjoying our eerie stories, leave a like, drop a comment, and share the terror with others. And for even more eerie content, follow us on social media. Keep the fear alive. Thanks for joining me on this spooky journey. Now, let's dive into the nightmare. When I was 18, I embarked on a long road trip from my hometown to my new college. I packed up my cheap SUV with everything I thought I might need for the year: clothes, books, and the usual essentials. This trip was special though, not just because it was my first long drive alone, but also because it would be the first time I'd be away from my family for an extended period. To say I was nervous would be an understatement. The journey was about 600 miles, split over 2 days of driving. I followed the directions provided by my map app, which estimated I'd reach my hotel around 11 p.m. Of course, considering gas stops and food, I knew it would likely be much later. By 7 p.m., the sun had completely set, and most of the cars on the road had disappeared. Every once in a while, headlights would appear in the distance, slowly fading as the other cars passed me. But for the most part, it was just me and the open road. That solitude began to make me feel both sleepy and restless. Around 10 p.m., I decided to pull over at the next gas station to refuel before the final stretch of the drive. After a few minutes, I saw the glow of the station's lights in the distance. It wasn't exactly a town, just a gas station in the middle of nowhere, with a small convenience store and a few pumps. There were no other cars around, and I didn't see any lights in the distance, so I figured I was in a fairly remote area. I parked at a pump, filled up my tank, and then got out to stretch my legs. As I glanced around, a man suddenly appeared out of the shadows and walked toward me. He looked to be in his 50s, and his appearance was rough. His clothes were tattered, and he looked like he hadn't shaved in weeks. I wasn't expecting anyone to approach me out here, especially not someone who looked as though he had been living on the streets. "Hi, do you need something?" I asked, hoping he wouldn't get too close. He stopped just a few feet from my car and looked around nervously before responding. "Take the exit back onto the highway," he said, pointing behind me at the road I had just come from. I stared at him, unsure of what he meant. The exit I had used to enter the gas station was a one-way road, so I didn't understand why he would want me to drive back that way. He repeated himself, this time more firmly. "Take the exit back onto the highway." I hesitated but said, "Okay." He didn't say anything else and walked off toward the side of the convenience store. I still felt uneasy about the whole encounter. Something didn't feel right, so I decided to go with my gut. I finished fueling and got back in my car, glancing over at the man once more. He had now settled down against the convenience store wall, staring into the darkness. As I drove back onto the highway entrance, something strange caught my attention. All the streetlights were out. It was pitch black, and I had to slow down, unsure of what was going on. I kept my eyes focused on the road, trying to make sense of the situation. That's when I saw it, off to my left, just a faint outline of a figure standing in the shadows. Before I could process what I was seeing, a pickup truck appeared out of nowhere, suddenly stopping right in front of my car. The doors flung open and 4 men jumped out. They were holding weapons, metal bats, knives and machetes. Their faces were bare, emotionless, and chillingly detached, like they had no remorse for what they were doing. Panicked, I slammed my car into reverse, trying to back away from them before they could get any closer. But as I backed up, I saw movement in the shadows. Dozens of people started emerging, some running toward my car. A few even tried to chase me as I sped off. My heart raced as I floored the gas pedal, driving as fast as I could. When I felt safe enough, I immediately called 911, but to my shock, I never received a follow-up or any kind of update on the situation. It was as if they didn't care, or maybe they hadn't even looked into it. I can't help but wonder if the strange man at the gas station had known what was about to happen. Was he trying to warn me? Maybe he saw something I didn't, and his cryptic words were meant to keep me from getting involved in something far worse. I'll never know for sure, but I consider myself incredibly lucky to have escaped that night with my life. To this day, I don't know what those men were planning or what would have happened if I hadn't listened to my instincts and turned away. In November 2005, I decided to use my vacation days for a cross-country adventure. Each year, my job gave us 10 vacation days, and since I hadn't used any yet, I thought a week-long journey exploring various states in the US would be a fantastic way to utilize them. For most of my travels, I preferred hitchhiking. Despite its negative reputation these days, I genuinely enjoyed it. Over the years, hitchhiking had allowed me to meet many fascinating people, some of whom had become lifelong friends. It felt like an adventure every time, connecting with strangers and sharing stories. One afternoon, around 2 p.m., I was walking down a rural road, giving the familiar thumbs-up sign to passing vehicles. I had been on the road for a while and my last ride seemed like ages ago. My usual optimism was beginning to wane, and I was starting to feel a bit desperate. Eventually, a red pickup truck pulled over beside me. Inside, there were two men who looked to be in their 40s. One of them leaned out and asked me where I was headed. I told him my destination, and after a brief, tense exchange of glances between the two, they signaled for me to get in. They appeared to be perfectly ordinary guys. I tossed my bag into the truck bed, climbed into the cab, and shut the door. However, as soon as I sat down, I noticed something unsettling. The entire floor of the truck was covered with various types of bullets. My initial sense of relief quickly turned to unease, but before I could second-guess my decision, the truck roared to life, and we were speeding down the highway at 60 miles per hour. To ease my anxiety, I attempted to engage the men in conversation. At first, they were responsive, and we exchanged pleasantries. However, the conversation took a dark turn when one of them revealed he had recently been released from prison for aggravated assault. My stomach twisted as the mood shifted. Not long after, they started probing about how much money I had. That's when it hit me. I might be in serious danger. I had been hitchhiking for several days, looking rather disheveled, so I quickly decided to downplay my situation. I told them I was homeless and had no money at all. The truck fell into an unsettling silence, and for the next 30 minutes, no one spoke. I noticed the driver glancing at me through the rearview mirror several times. Although I tried to ignore it, a gnawing sense of dread grew within me. Looking back, I wish I had paid more attention to those cues. 15 minutes later, my fears were confirmed when the driver turned off the highway onto a desolate dirt road. I was immediately on high alert. My heart pounded as I asked, where are we going?" There was no response. As the truck continued down the isolated road, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I quickly grabbed my bag, unlocked the door, and jumped out of the moving vehicle. I glanced back to see the red pickup slam on its brakes and the reverse lights flicker on. In a panic, I sprinted towards a nearby cornfield, my legs pumping as fast as they could. I ran frantically for what felt like an eternity, my breath coming in ragged gasps. After about 5 minutes, I could have sworn I heard distant gunshots. The sound sent a jolt of fear through me, pushing me to run even faster. Eventually, I reached a sign indicating the main highway. My mind was racing as I dialed 911 and explained my situation and location to the operator. I waited anxiously in the cornfield until a police officer arrived. The officer drove me to the nearest police station where I filed a report. The experience left me shaken. I didn't have much to offer in terms of detailed descriptions, just a red pickup truck with 2 men inside. I hadn't managed to get their license plate number, and their faces were a blur in my memory. Despite the lack of concrete details, I was deeply grateful to have escaped unharmed. The whole ordeal was a harrowing reminder of how quickly things can go wrong. I can't fully comprehend what those men had planned, but I have no doubt that I narrowly avoided a dangerous situation. Though I still hitchhike occasionally, the experience has made me much more cautious. Now, I carefully evaluate each ride, ensuring I feel safe before accepting. The lesson I learned from that day is one I carry with me. Always trust your instincts and be vigilant, no matter how familiar or routine an activity may seem. When I was 18, my parents decided to take a week-long trip to celebrate their anniversary, leaving me alone at home. With my sister already moved out, it was just me in the house. Our home was situated at the end of a long, winding dirt driveway, nestled deep in a dense forest. The road leading to our house was quiet, with large, spaced-out properties, giving it a feeling of complete isolation. In our small town, everyone knew each other, and you'd often run into familiar faces at the local gas station, grocery store, or bars. At the time, I wasn't old enough to visit those bars, but I'd soon become familiar with them. One afternoon, while my parents were away, I decided to head to the local gas station to fill up my car. It was an uneventful day until a black Jeep Cherokee pulled up next to my pump. The driver, a man with a neatly trimmed goatee, stepped out and greeted me with a friendly smile. Small-town interactions like these were common, so I didn't think much of it. After he started pumping gas, he walked over to my side of the pump and asked for directions to the interstate. I gave him detailed instructions, and he pulled out a notepad to jot them down. I found it odd that he wasn't using his phone like most people, but I didn't think much of it at the time. Once he finished writing, he thanked me and asked if I was from around here. I told him I had grown up in the area, and he mentioned he was from out of town, though he didn't specify where. After another brief exchange, he returned to his Jeep, put the nozzle back, and asked for my name. I introduced myself as Kate, and he complimented it before getting back into his vehicle. I drove home, turning onto the familiar dirt driveway. As I made the turn, I noticed the black Jeep following me. Initially, I didn't think much of it, but then I saw the Jeep turn in the opposite direction from the route I had given him for the interstate. It struck me as odd, but I shrugged it off, assuming he had just gotten confused. I went about my evening, not thinking about it further. Later that night, after meeting up with some friends, I returned home. As I walked from my car to the front door, I heard a voice call out from the woods. "Kate." A chill ran down my spine. It wasn't the voice of an animal, it was clear and distinct. I quickly rushed inside, slammed the door, and sat on the couch, trying to steady my breath. The neighbors knew me, but with the houses so spaced out, it seemed strange that someone would call me without introducing themselves. I decided to call my parents and tell them about the unsettling experience. They reassured me it was probably just one of the neighbors, and someone might stop by to check on me. The next day, I stayed home, feeling uneasy. As night fell, I headed out again to meet friends, but as I stepped outside, I heard the same voice call my name from nearby. My heart raced. I immediately turned and rushed back inside, locking the door behind me. I called 911 and texted my family to keep them updated. When the police arrived, They conducted a search of the property but found nothing unusual. They advised me to call again if the situation persisted, but their presence didn't calm my nerves. I decided to stay inside for the rest of the night, not daring to go back out. The following evening, after work, I came home and parked my car. As I walked toward the door, I once again heard footsteps, not the scurrying of animals, but distinct, human-like steps. Then, standing on the front deck, I heard the voice again. "Kate, don't call the cops on me again, cutie." A wave of panic washed over me. I shouted that I needed help, that something was wrong, and rushed inside, locking the door behind me. I called 911 once more, my voice trembling with fear. This time, the police arrived quickly. They searched the property again, but once again, no signs of trouble. My parents, now very concerned, suggested I stay with a friend for the night. I agreed, and my friend Alex offered me a place to stay. I packed quickly and checked the windows, making sure everything was secure before heading out. But as I rushed to my car, I heard something outside the driver's side door. When I looked over, I saw a man wearing a face mask trying to open the door. Fear paralyzed me as he started pounding on the glass with his elbow. I panicked and managed to drive away, racing down the driveway and speeding to Alex's house, crying the whole way. Alex and her father stayed on the phone with me, and her dad said he would have picked me up had he known the situation was this dire. We called the police again, and they arrived at both my parents' house and Alex's place to investigate. The officers checked for forced entry, but once again found nothing. The whole ordeal seemed like the most excitement the local police had seen in a while. The next day, my parents returned, and I finally felt safe again. Looking back on everything, I'm convinced the man from the gas station had deliberately followed me home, scoped out the house, and then started his frightening behavior. I regretted giving him my real name and not being more aware of his actions. The entire experience was a stark reminder of how quickly something can escalate, even in a small, seemingly safe town. It was also a big factor in my decision to move into my own apartment a few months later. In the peaceful town of Redwood Grove, tucked away behind rows of modest homes, there existed a playground that had become the source of disturbing whispers. The children of the town spoke in hushed tones about a swing set that was cursed, a place where children had inexplicably vanished over the years. The swings would move on their own, swaying back and forth with an eerie rhythm, as if an invisible hand were at play. A dark, formless shadow seemed to linger nearby, casting a palpable sense of fear over the once joyful space. One crisp autumn evening, a brave and inquisitive boy named Jake, with messy brown hair and sharp green eyes, decided to test the rumors. His friends had warned him to stay away, and his parents had told him the stories were just that, stories. But Jake, determined to prove them wrong, grabbed his flashlight and ventured to the mysterious playground alone. As Jake neared the swing set, the air grew inexplicably cold, and a chill ran down his spine. The quiet surroundings that had once felt peaceful now seemed ominous. The moonlight barely pierced through the thick, overgrown trees surrounding the playground, leaving the area in an unsettling shadow. The swings stood motionless, waiting for someone, perhaps a foolish soul like Jake, to approach. He took a deep breath and stepped closer, his footsteps the only sound in the otherwise silent night. Reaching the rusted swing set, he noticed the chains creaking faintly in the wind. Jake pushed aside his growing unease and, with determination, sat on one of the swings. He began to pump his legs, eager to show the world that the stories were nothing more than tall tales. But as his feet pushed against the ground, something shifted in the air. A dark shadow, like a living mist, began to slither across the ground toward him. The shape seemed to grow and stretch, its tendrils reaching out with unnatural speed. Jake's heart raced, and the hair on the back of his neck stood on end as the shadow enveloped him, pulling him into a world of swirling darkness. The swing set groaned under an invisible weight. The chains twisted and rattled as if something unseen was tugging them, and the once still swings began to sway, moving in a way that felt wrong, as if mocking Jake's defiance. The atmosphere around him thickened, pressing in on him from all sides. The playground had become a prison, and the shadows that lingered there had claimed him as their own. Time seemed to bend and warp in this strange, dark realm. Days passed like hours, and weeks blurred into months. Jake was trapped in the shadow's grip, longing for the warmth of the sun and the comfort of his family. His once joyful spirit began to fade, his green eyes losing their shine, replaced by a deep, haunting sorrow. Back in Redwood Grove, Jake's disappearance left the town shaken. Search parties combed the area, but the playground yielded no answers. The eerie swings, once a symbol of childhood joy, became a grim reminder of the boy who had vanished. Parents warned their children to stay away, the playground slowly becoming a place of whispered fear and suspicion. Years went by, and the dark memory of the playground faded from the town's collective memory until it was little more than an urban legend. The story of Jake's disappearance was told in whispers, a tale passed down like a warning to those who dared to linger too long in the shadows. Decades later, a construction crew arrived in Redwood Grove to clear the land for a new housing development. Unaware of the dark history tied to the playground, they began their work, preparing to demolish the old, neglected site. But as the bulldozers rolled in, a strange tension filled the air, as if the earth itself was resisting their efforts. When the crew began to dismantle the swing set, the ground seemed to tremble. A dense fog rolled in, blanketing the area in a thick, suffocating mist. The swings began to move again, creaking and groaning in protest. Then, out of the fog, the shadow that had been dormant for years began to materialize, stronger and more terrifying than before. The air filled with a cold, suffocating presence, and with a guttural wail, the shadow surged forward, sweeping over the construction workers. One by one, they were consumed, their screams muffled by the fog and the darkness. The cursed swing set stood tall, its chains rattling with an ominous satisfaction as the last of the workers disappeared into the abyss. When the fog finally lifted, the playground was silent once again. The swings stilled, and the cursed set remained standing as a chilling reminder of the dark forces that haunted the place. The construction crew was gone, and the town of Redwood Grove, once filled with life, had become a ghost town. The legend of Jake's disappearance and the horrors that followed had become a dark truth, one that would never be forgotten. Have you ever faced something truly terrifying? Eerie Shadows wants to hear your story. Share your chilling experiences with us on Reddit, and together we'll uncover the eerie mysteries lurking in the shadows. If you'd like to support the channel and help us create even more terrifying content, consider checking out our Patreon or Ko-fi. Your support helps us keep the horror alive. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more bone-chilling tales like this one. Stay tuned for the next eerie episode